Hi, my name is Corey from FTC Team 9779, the PIEaters, and today I have a FTC Programming Basics video. First, I thought I'd explain why I'm making this video. It's basically a beginner's guide to get your hardware named and ready for coding, introduce some basics of Java concepts like classes and methods and variables, and familiarize you with the concepts of op modes and how you can register them and use them to program your robot. So next, a little vocabulary. These are words you might hear people use when they're talking about programming for FTC. One phrase you might hear is SDK, which stands for Software Development Kit. It is basically a kit of programming tools. It's a set of code written to more easily accomplish a programming task. Another phrase you might hear is IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment. This is a piece of software that's used for coding. So when you start typing your code into it, it will highlight different things, different colors to make it easier to read, and it'll complete statements for you so you don't have to remember everything, and it makes it quicker. Also, if you get something wrong, it'll highlight it in red and then offer suggestions to how to fix it. And then it's also compiles your code so you can actually run it. Android Studio is an IDE for coding with Android devices. This is the IDE that we'll be using to code our robot, since our robots are run with Android devices. And FTC App Master is an SDK written by First and Qualcomm made to run FTC robots. So this is a kit of programming tools provided by First and Qualcomm to make it easier for you to program your robot. Some things you should have already done. You should have set up your phones and have them communicating with each other. You should have installed Android Studio and make sure that when you open it there are no errors. You should have downloaded the SDK, which again is FTC App Master. And you should have prepared Android Studio for FTC by installing the correct APIs. If you haven't already done these things, you should probably do them now. Out at firstinspires.org/node/5181, there are a lot of team help and documents. One in particular called Pushbot Build Guide has a lot of useful information and pretty much everything you should have already done. Also, out at GitHub, you can search FTC App Master and you will be able to download the SDK. Now some basics of the phone's apps. So first, pairing the driver station with the robot controller. This basically means that you're telling the two phones that they're supposed to be together, because at a competition there's going to be hundreds of phones floating around everywhere. So these two phones need to know that they need to be connected, not connected to anyone else. I won't get into how to do this, but it is found in the magic document of the Pushbot Build Guide. Okay, so next we're going to make sure you can select an op mode and know what an op mode is. An op mode is code that is designed to allow control over the robot. So this is the code that you will actually write to give your robot certain behaviors. So if you wanted your robot to pick up a cube or shoot a cube or something like that, this is the code that will make your robot do that. So when you open up your driver station phone, it should look something like this. Next you're going to click this arrow and a menu like this will pop up. This is all of the op modes. Currently there shouldn't be anything that you've written in here. It should just be the op modes provided by First as example op modes and tutorial op modes. But once you put your op modes into this menu, they will show up right here and you'll be able to run them. A little about Java. Java uses Object-Oriented Programming, abbreviated as OOP. So there are many languages that use Object-Oriented Programming, so Java is just one of the many. A Java object, everything in Java is represented as an object. So if you had a program where there were cats and dogs in a house, a cat would be an object, a dog would be an object, and the house would be an object. And then if you had a game where you had a spaceship that launched missiles at asteroids, then the spaceship would be an object, the missiles would be an object, and the asteroid would be an object. Even the scoreboard that keeps track of how many asteroids you've destroyed would be an object. Objects are reusable. So what this means is that if you had your spaceship and you wanted to fire a missile and then you wanted to fire another missile, then you wouldn't want to have to rewrite missile code. So you can just call on the missile code to create a new missile. So then no matter how many missiles you want to fire, then you can just call on that one bit of code and make as many missiles as you want. So this is what makes object-oriented programming so powerful, because other languages that don't use object-oriented programming, you would have to rewrite the code for every missile. Some examples of some FTC custom objects are servos, motors, and any sensors you might have. Again, back to the reusable part. If you had, let's say you can have 8 motors on your robot. You wouldn't want to have to rewrite code for every motor on your robot. So you can just call the DC motor code and create all 8 of your motors from that one DC motor code. Now some object properties. Every object is defined by what it knows and what it does. What it knows are called variables. So let's go back to our cats and dogs in a house example. So our dog object might know its weight, its breed, and its color. But this would vary per dog. So one dog might be brown and weigh 15 pounds and have a breed of a Chihuahua. But another dog might be white, weigh 85 pounds, and have an Alaskan Husky breed. These types of properties are stored in variables. These properties are things that the dog object knows about itself. And then we also have what it does, which are called methods. So let's go over to a cat example. So a cat can eat, it can sleep, and it can meow. But every cat can do these things, so it doesn't vary per object. So within our cat object, you would have methods to eat, you would have a method to sleep, you would have a method to meow. So every cat can eat, sleep, and meow. So variables are things that the object knows about itself, and methods are the things that the object can do, or its behaviors. All objects have these two properties. Classes. Classes are blueprints of how to create objects. So let's go to our house example. Imagine you had a blueprint to create a house. The blueprint itself is not a house, but you can use the blueprint to create a house. If you want to make a house, you just call on that blueprint. So you can call on that blueprint as many times as you want to create as many houses as you want. So a class itself is not an object, but you call on a class to create an object, and then you can create as many objects as you want from that one class. So now I'll show you how to create a new op mode. Remember from earlier that an op mode is a set of code to give your robot certain behaviors to do what you want it to. Let's look at an example op mode that I've made. So here's an op mode I've made. It actually currently won't do anything, but it is a good teaching device. So if we look at this first line, we can see that it is a class named example op mode. So where I have put example op mode, that's where you will put your class name. So you need to name it something that makes sense to whatever op mode you're programming. So if you had the robot that throws cubes, you could name it cube thrower op mode, or anything that makes sense to the current op mode you're programming. And then it extends op mode. So what this part means is that this class basically is an op mode. First has written a class named op mode, and our class named example op mode is inheriting all the traits and behaviors from op mode. So if you extend op mode, you have to have 4 inherent methods. You have to have init, start, loop, and stop. So these are 4 methods that our op mode must have, because the robot can initialize, the robot can start, the robot can loop, and the robot can stop. So our first method is called init. So within here you can see 2 curly brackets. What these mean is basically that this is a block of code. So our method has an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. So whenever this method is run, anything between those 2 curly brackets will be run because it's within the block of code that's associated with the method. So this init method is going to happen when you hit the init button on the phone. it's going to happen once, and then it's going to be done. So it's going to come in here, and right when you hit init, it's going to go through that. It's going to go through all the code in between those two curly brackets, and then be done. An example of some things you might put in the init code block is maybe configuring your hardware, or maybe setting up any variables you might need to start, or maybe setting the positions of your servos if they need to start in a specific position. So any setup you might need on your robot. So now we get to the start method. So start is going to be run once when you hit the play button on the phone. Anything within this code block is going to be run once and then be done right when you hit start. So some things you might want to put in the start method are maybe calibrating your sensors, or if you didn't want to have your servos reset and in it, you can put them in start, but you don't actually have to put anything in start. Our team doesn't a lot because it's sometimes not necessary, and you can put anything that you need in it. So now we get to the loop method, and in here is where basically all the meat of your code will go. So this is going to happen once you hit that start button. This is going to happen dozens of times per second. So this is going to happen very fast. It's going to execute this code and then go to the top and execute the code and go to the top and execute the code. So it's happening over and over and over again many times per second. So this is where you'd put in checks for the data from the controller and checking if the buttons are pressed or if the joysticks are pushed forward, and then applying that data to your wheels and to your tools. And so this is where the main controlling of your robot goes. And then this loop method will happen over and over again until you hit the stop button, and then this method called stop will execute once from curly bracket to curly bracket. It will execute the code once. So stop is where you would put any cleanup you might have. We don't really use it that often, but if you need any cleanup, like resetting any servos or turning a light off on your color sensors or anything, then you can put that here. So now I will actually show you how to create the skeleton op mode. So we're going to create the thing I just showed you, and again, it won't actually do anything, but it is a good starting point, and you can save it to copy and paste for later op modes. So when you go within Android Studio, there's a directory on the left side of the screen telling you what folder you're in. You're going to want to go to this directory location. I'll show you how to get there in just a second. Right-click the folder named Op Modes and do New Java Class. For now, just name it Example Op Mode or something similar. You can name it anything you want, but I'm just going to name mine Example Op Mode. Okay, so I've opened up Android Studio, and if the directory isn't already over on the left, then you just have to click this tab labeled Project, and then the directory will show up. So to go within a folder, just click the arrows. So we need to go within FTC Robot Controller, Java, com.qualcomm.ftc Robot Controller, and then op modes. So this is the folder where all of your op modes will be stored. There will probably be less currently in this folder. There will probably just be the default example op modes, but whenever you create a new op mode, they will come in this folder and make this folder bigger and bigger. So to create a new op mode, we're going to right-click the op modes folder and do New Java Class. So the only two things on this page that might be different are the creator name and your class name. So the class name that's right here must match this right here, and this right here as well. So the op modes folder that's actually storing your class has to match this. If it doesn't match, then your class won't work and your op mode won't work, and there will be errors. So make sure that those match. So now we have to type extends op mode. So what this does is, remember, now our class will inherit all the behaviors of op mode. So right now, as you can see, there's an error. So remember that op mode is a class. So if we ever need to use other classes in our op mode, then we need to import them. And the great thing about Android Studio is that it imports them for you. So all we have to do to make it auto import is press Alt Enter, and then it auto generates this line of code. So up here in this area is where all of your imports will go. By the time you're done with your op mode, there will probably be more, like motors and servos and sensors. But again, Android Studio will do that for you, and all you have to do is Alt Enter. So now when we come back down here, we still have an error. So if we click over it, hopefully we can press Alt Enter and it'll tell us the error. So for op mode, if you extend op mode, remember you have to have the 4 methods of init, start, loop, and stop. The only 2 it requires you to have are init and loop. So when we press Alt Enter, we need to implement methods, and then just hit OK, and it'll auto-generate the init and loop methods. So it doesn't auto-generate start and stop because those aren't required, but I'm going to do it anyways. So this first line I'm writing is @override, and all that, what this is that it's overriding one of the methods from the op mode class. There's a method called start in the op mode class, and we're just overriding that method and putting what we want in it. Now I'm writing public void. You don't need to know what that is, but you just need to write it because that's, if you don't write it, then your method won't work. And then start, so that's the method name. And then I'm going to do open curly bracket, and then that auto-generates the close curly bracket, so that if we forget to write the close curly bracket, then our program won't be messed up due to improper brackets. And then I'll press Enter so that there's this box for us to put all of our code. So now anything in here will be executed when we press the Start button. And then I'll do the same thing at the end of the program for stop. So now we have our completed skeleton op mode with the 4 methods in it: start, loop, and stop. So now we have this amazing skeleton op mode that doesn't actually do anything, but we need to register it so that it will show up on the driver station phone. Because right now, if you went onto the driver station phone and did that little drop down that we did earlier, the skeleton op mode won't show up in that list of op modes. So we're going to make it show up right now using the op mode registration. So once we do this, it will appear on the driver station's list of op modes. I'll show you these next few steps in a second in Android Studio. In a second, we're going to go to the same directory we were just in, and we're going to find the FTC opmode register.java class and open it. And we're going to add a line of code to this existing class that will register your op mode, so it will show up on the list of op modes. So I have my skeleton op mode open, and we're going to register it. So go to FTC Robot Controller, Java, com.qualcomm.ftc Robot Controller, op modes, and then here's all your op modes. So we're going to look for one called FTC Op Mode Register. It's alphabetized, so it should be fairly easy to find. And then open it by double clicking. When you open this, the only thing you really need to pay attention to is anything inside this method called register. This is where you're going to be writing your registration code. So your register method might look a bit different than mine. Currently all mine has is the registration of a couple of op modes. So I have a canine tank mode, a gyro test, and a color test. If I didn't want to register one of these, I could just comment it out, so I won't register those two, but we'll pay attention to this one right here. So these quotes, whatever you put in here, this is what's going to show up on the drop-down menu of the phone. So when you click that drop-down arrow and see all the op modes, whatever you put inside these quotes, that's what is going to show up there in place of your op mode. So this can be whatever you want. You probably want to name it something that makes sense to the op mode. And then this part right here needs to be specific. So this is going to be the actual op mode class name. So if we come over here on the left again, we can see that there is a MR RGB example class, and see that it matches it exactly. So it says MR RGB example dot class, and then over here we can see that it says MR RGB example. So this needs to match your op mode. So now we're going to register our op mode. So we're going to type manager.register, and we'll just say skeleton op mode. And then the name of the class, .class. And then that should register your op mode. So we could change, in the quotes, we could change it to this does nothing, and it would still work fine, but it would show up as this does nothing. But we'll leave it the same for now. But if you changed this to say this does nothing, then it wouldn't work anymore, because it would be looking for a class over here named this does nothing, and it wouldn't be able to find it. So make sure that this matches your op mode name. So another thing you can do instead of writing that out is you can just copy and paste it. So let's say we're gonna register something else. So let's find an op mode over here to register. We'll register pushbot auto. So we'll type in the quotes, the name of it that we want it to be. So I'll just say pushbot autonomous. And then the name of the class, which is pushbot auto dot class. And then that's all you need to do to register the pushbot auto class. So now you can go on your phone and go in that drop down menu and select any one of these op modes and run it. So that's all for this video. I build on some of these concepts in the next video, so be sure to check that one out.